Syria prevents the flight of Turkish airlines over Syrian territories. And the Syrian Arab Army units purged several villages in Damascus countryside from terrorists and kills dozens of them in Aleppo and Hama. And President Chavez of Venezuela appoints General Nestor Riverol as Minister of Interior. Good afternoon, this is News in English. The government of the Syrian Arab Republic, in retaliation against the Turkish air piracy, decided to prevent the flight of civil Turkish airlines over Syrian territories, starting from midnight on Saturday, October 13th. In a press release, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed regret for the Turkish government's decision to prevent the flight of Syrian airlines over Turkish territories. This escalation was primarily targeted against the interests of the Syrian people. The deputy leader of the Republican People's Party, Mr. Bülent Tezcan, renewed his utter rejection of the intervention of Erdogan's government in Syrian affairs and its recruitment of terrorists, training them and sending them into Syria. He asserted that such actions were crimes according to the law. Turkish mass media quoted Mr. Tezcan as having said that Erdogan claimed that those Syrians who come to Turkey are innocent people subjected to unjust repression. He added that the Turkish people do not turn away refugees from various countries. However, what's happening along the Syrian-Turkish borders is the training of terrorist militias of the so-called Free Army. Mr. Tezcan added that Erdogan's government sends armed terrorists from Turkey to Syria. Erdogan's government recruits terrorists from various parts of the world via the internet through a Turkish telephone and address on the electronic website of the militia of the Free Army. The Syrian Arab Army units continued to chase terrorist groups in several areas. They carried out operations that destroyed terrorist hideouts and killed dozens of them. In Aleppo, unit of our armed forces destroyed terrorist hideouts containing anti-aircraft missiles and killed dozens of terrorists near the agricultural school and Al-Inzarat quarter. A booby-trapped vehicle driven by a suicide terrorist exploded on the Al-Mazzi highway, causing considerable material damage. The car was full of explosives. However, there were no casualties. In Al-Mazzi, an explosive device was detonated by a terrorist group in the car of journalist Ayman Wannous, who works in a magazine, causing critical wounds. Mr. Wannous was taken to hospital to receive treatment. And in Damascus countryside, units of our armed forces have purged several places from armed terrorist groups. The purged places included Zibdin, Deir al-Asafir, Shab'a and Mahmoudiyya in the eastern Ghouta. In Hama, the security forces killed a number of terrorists and confiscated their weapons at the crossroads of Kafratun. Other terrorists opened fire on citizens in a refugee camp, killing Rashid Assadi and wounding 2 other citizens. A group of terrorists opened fire of RPG missiles against the house of a handicapped person in Hama. 4 patients were wounded and material damage was inflicted on the building. And in related contexts and in Homs, 10 working women were killed and several others wounded when a terrorist group attacked a bus with an explosive device. The bus was carrying workers along the highway of Zayd al-Jabraya to the east of Homs. In Hasaka, army units raided a hideout of armed terrorist groups in Tel Ahmes, Al-Qamishli countryside and seized a large amount of weapons that had been dismantled to parts by the terrorists so that they can be easily hidden and carried to other terrorist groups. The weapons included automatic rifles, Ray PK launchers, RPG launchers, and a number of explosive devices and anti-tank shells. In the Latakia countryside, Syrian Arab Army units killed all members of an armed terrorist group that was terrorizing citizens and attacking public and private properties in the village of Shib al-Ghar. The army seized automatic weapons, a Cobra rocket, shells and RPG launchers. The Turkish writer Uhat Mangi wrote an article in Al Watan newspaper. She described the words of the Turkish Chief of Staff against Syria as aggressive and intended to provoke war. She added that the task of the Chief of Staff is to protect Turkish citizens and to prevent dragging the country into wars. She asserted that war was being incited by Erdogan's government because of the policy of Davutoglu and how he dictates by foreign orders. The writer said Erdogan's government was actually interfering in Syria's internal affairs and giving shelter to armed terrorists who kill Syrian citizens. The government of Mauritania announced that President Mohammed Ould Abdelaziz was wounded when his entourage came under fire by mistake during his return to Nouakchott. The Minister of Transport, Hamdi Ould Mahjoub, said that the Mauritanian military patrol did not recognize the identity of the entourage. However, the wound was light. A security source told Agence France Presse that the president would be taken to a specialized French hospital to receive further treatment after a surgical operation in the military hospital of Nouakchott took out a bullet from his body. In Egypt, 35 parties and political movements called for demonstrations to be held next Friday in At-Tahrir Square in Cairo and in other Egyptian cities in retaliation to the aggressive crackdown of the peaceful demonstrations that demanded more accountability to Morsi last Friday. Egyptian national parties stressed their determination to submit a collective complaint to the General Prosecutor to investigate the aggression by the members of the Muslim Brotherhood against the peaceful demonstrators of liberal parties and to bring the perpetrators to an urgent trial. The parties also demanded the formation of a legal committee to document these events and follow up the investigation, as dozens were injured in At-Tahrir Square and the surrounding streets last Friday. The Egyptian national parties asserted that the Muslim Brotherhood and the Freedom and Justice Party were fully responsible for the events. The Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez has held a ministerial amendment after a few days his successes in the presidential elections. Chavez named the General Nestor Riverol as the Interior Minister. Also, he appointed 2 new ministers for Environment and Communication and Foreign Minister Nicolas Maduro as his deputy. And with this, we conclude our news for today. For more details, you can visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. After the break, Vani has the latest in economy.
Good afternoon. The People's Assembly held its second regular session of the first legislative term headed by Assembly Speaker Mohammed Jihad Al-Laham. The Assembly approved reports by the specialized committees on the adoption of a number of legislative decrees issued by the President. The Assembly also listened to written questions by members of the Parliament on the possibility of finding a solution to the educational hospitals in Damascus and to address the reasons for their deteriorating scientific and research levels. Discussions also dealt with the possibility of postponing the wheat farmers' payments to the Agricultural Bank for the current year, taking into consideration the difficult current situation in the country. Deliberations also dealt with expanding the electric grid to include the irregular housing areas. Discussion also focused on supporting the General Establishment for Investment to carry out projects that will boost the market and bring more job opportunities. Prime Minister Dr. Wael Al-Halqi inaugurated yesterday the Basel Hospital for Cardiology and Heart Surgery and the Education Faculty at Tishrin University in Latakia with a total cost of over 2 billion Syrian pounds. The inauguration coincided with the commemoration of the 39th anniversary of the October Liberation War. Dr. Al-Halqi stressed the government's efforts to fulfill the Syrian people's needs in parallel with completing the establishment of services, development and investment institutions, despite the current crisis in the country. He said that the inauguration of the education faculty came within the government's plans to increase the capacity of universities in line with the population growth, adding that the inaugurated faculty has the capacity to accommodate more than 8,000 students. He referred that other centers are to be opened in Deir ez-Zor, Al-Restan and in all Syrian provinces to meet citizens' needs. Later on, the Prime Minister chaired a meeting at Tishrin University Hospital in Latakia and and reviewed means to overcome obstacles regarding providing technical and medical equipment to be put into service. The person in charge of the cotton gathering centers in Al-Raqqa Governorate and Ain Isa announced that the centers are receiving additional quantities of cotton coming in from Deir ez-Zor Governorate. The director Yassin Al-Hamada pointed out that the overall marketed cotton since mid-September up till now reached 80,000 tons. He said that the spinning plants have started work with a capacity of 300 tons, while the purified cotton reached 6,500 tons, 2,400 tons of cotton fiber, and 4,000 tons of cotton seed. The Hasaka branch of the Department of Agriculture Production started distributing the wheat seeds to farmers according to the notes received from the Agricultural Bank. The branch manager of the establishment affirmed that 63,000 tons of wheat have been screened and sterilized. He also pointed out that the establishment stock contains 156,000 tons of wheat, 2,579 tons of barley, 198 tons of lentils, and 203 tons of chickpeas, which will be distributed to the farmers immediately after receiving delivery notes from the Agricultural Bank. The Hama branch of the Establishment of Agricultural Production will start distributing sugar beet seeds to farmers. The branch manager of the establishment, Mr. Mahmoud Suleiman Isa, affirmed that the sugar beet seeds are available with huge quantities in the warehouses, specifying the price to be at 800 Syrian pounds per kilogram. Each farmer could get seeds according to the land area specified in their agricultural licenses that were issued by the farmers' associations. Mr. Isa also pointed out that the wheat and barley seeds are being distributed for the forthcoming season. Chinese exports were twice more than what was forecast for September, while imports also increased. The Chinese customs showed a 9.9% increase during the last year's exports rate, and twice more than the estimated average, which was 5%, and much more than the annual increase of August, which was 2.7%. Imports rose by 2.4% in September, while the surplus was $27 billion and $700 million. Oil headed for its first weekly gain in a month in New York, as OPEC production fell to the lowest level in 8 months, and increasing Middle East tensions prompted concern that supplies may be further disrupted. U.S. stocks had the biggest weekly retreat since June as the International Monetary Fund reduced its global growth forecasts, while most of the Japanese shares rose even after some companies fell the most in more than a year, dragging the Nikkei stock average to a fourth straight loss. Automakers gained after China and Japan agreed to hold talks over territorial disputes. And now over to the exchange rates according to the bulletin of the Central Bank of Syria. And with this conclude our news. Thank you for watching and goodbye.